to send any questions during the discussion using the Q&A chat box, and we'll address any of the questions either during or after the panel. Okay, let's get to it. So first and foremost, I'd like to introduce Anita Chow, who is the Director of Marketing at KPMG. Anita has over 10 years experience in organizing and project managing a number of global, regional and local conferences and events and meetings, ranging from bespoke executive roundtables to conferences attended by 600 plus delegates, as well as gala dinners for over 2,000 people. She's got a proven track record of organizing, planning and implementing successful events while staying within budget, and also providing logistical details, coordinating with speakers, food and beverage, and preparing contracts for the event. Please welcome Anita to the panel. I'd also like to introduce Noor Hamid, who is the Regional Director for Asia Pacific at the International Congress and Convention Association, or the ICCA. Noor joined the governing body in 2009 and has been successful in strengthening the ICCA's footprint as one of the most successful international associations within the region. And his biggest achievement is making APAC the largest chapter in ICCA's global community. Please welcome Noor to the panel. Our next panelist is Greg Crandall, who is the Senior VP for the Global Activation Team at Pico Group. Greg has over 15 years of Silicon Valley experience specializing in content and event services for Apple, IBM, Motorola, Silicon Graphics, Adobe Systems, and Disney. 18 years in Asia, where he's created his own agency, serving such clients as the Venetian, Cathay Pacific, Nokia, and Mercedes-Benz. And Greg has personally delivered over 100 client-based launches and events. Please welcome Greg to our panel. Next, I'd like to introduce David Abranilla, who is the founder and president of Mediacom Solutions, Inc. David is the founder and CEO, and also the organizer of the Philippine SME Business Expo, the Entrepreneur, the Franchise Expo Philippines, the Baby, Kids and Family Expo Philippines, and the Property Expo Philippines. Since 2012, Mediacom Solutions specializing in conceptualizing, organizing and marketing B2B and B2C exhibition and conferences, supporting 80 business sectors with 1,200 exhibiting companies and over 100,000 event attendees per year. Please welcome David to our panel. And finally, I'd like to introduce Eric Schmidt, the CEO and co-founder of EventBank. Eric is focused on delivering cloud solutions that transform the way professional communities enable and enrich relationships. EventBank has offices in 10 countries and clients in over 50. Eric's focus is to continue to build the best product for EventBank's clients and expanding the company's presence in emerging and developing markets around the world. Over the last 18 years, Eric has founded and incubated several companies from the ground up, including China Entrepreneurs, which was the top community organization for more than 50,000 entrepreneurs, hosting more than 100 conferences annually. He was also elected as a member of the American Chamber of Commerce and China's Board of Governors for 3 years, 2017, 18, and 19, and is recognized as an authority on digital transformation and business in Asia. He's been featured in media outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Barron's, BBC, CCTV, China Daily, and numerous outlets. Please welcome Eric to the panel. Over to you.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining. We have a massive amount of people who are interested in figuring out what's next for events. First of all, we'd like to thank our panelists for joining this afternoon. For me, it's 12:15 a.m. here in the United States. So if I get the time of the day wrong, my apologies in advance. But nonetheless, we're here to talk about really how are we going to move forward. The last 2 months have been a massive disruption to businesses, to event venues, to hotels, to suppliers, to the entire want to look forward. We've seen so much negativity around really what has happened, the immediate impact of, certainly layoffs across, massive parts of our industry. And today we really want to talk about what's next and how can we look back at some of the parallels we've seen going back to the global financial crisis. And then, obviously, as we look forward to, beyond the current situation, what are some of those strategies that we should be thinking about? And hopefully we will also not only hear everybody's opinion, but we also get to hear some questions from the audience. As Kenny mentioned, if you do have questions, feel free to just put it into the chat or in the Q&A, and I will make sure that if it's something that's relevant to the particular topic of discussion, I'll be able to throw it in and make sure that our panelists here today are able to answer that for you. So if we could, basically what I'd like to make sure everybody gets a quick introduction, 1 minute. What kind of events have you been organizing? What has been your involvement? And certainly, how have you spent the last 2 months certainly reacting to the current situation as it is today? I'm going to start with Anita, and we'll make our way around the, can't say table, but we'll just call it a table.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for inviting me to this webinar. So just to give you some backgrounds to what we've done in the past year, for KPMG, Hong Kong and China, we've done over 600 events normally, face-to-face events. Didn't touch any webinars at the time. And they range from, as the intro suggested, a very small sort of B2B roundtables to large-scale events. But the last couple of months, actually since Chinese New Year, we adopted the webinar sort of platform quite quickly. We had to do a lot of due diligence as to what kind of platforms we could use because of our security. But yes, we work a lot with chambers now, as well as professional associations in rolling out a number of these webinars, so virtual events.
Great, David.
Yeah, hello, hi, I'm David Abranilia from Mediacom Solutions. I'm based from the Philippines in Manila. And yeah, we are primarily in the exhibitions business. And of course, our industry has been hit very, very badly. If you want to see an adult man crying, I am. Yeah, but we're in touch very strongly with the government right now to see, what the next steps will be for us as an industry at large. So I'm talking about MICE in general, so not just exhibitions, but the entire events industry. And yeah, we're also adopting right now this whole digital transformation. We're informing most of the time our community just on the things that are happening from the government side, and we're also looking continuously on what are the next solutions and how the events will look like after the lockdown, because definitely the way how we know the events industry will change, at least for the next coming year.
David, how many expos do you normally organize in a given year?
We do around 6 exhibitions in a year, and so we also have international attendees there. And yeah, right now everything's on hold, right? So it's a global wait and see situation. Everything is, our lockdown is until April 30. From the most exhibitions organizers here in the Philippines, what I heard of is that most of the events have been postponed until August. So everybody is looking at holding events again in August, but we have to see how the events will look like. Venues as well, we have to communicate also with the venues right now, because they have to be new guidelines now in terms of...
So David, just a quick intro, and then we'll get to some of those questions.
Of course, sorry.
Yeah. Those questions in a bit. Noor, over to you.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Noor. I'm based in Kuala Lumpur, and I represent the International Congress and Convention Association. Our head office is in Amsterdam, and our membership is worldwide. However, having said that, our largest membership is in Asia Pacific, which is almost 35 to 38% at the moment. We organize about between 50 to 60 events a year, smaller and mid-size in terms of training, workshop, symposium, colloquium for our members. And there are at least about 300 activities or events that we take part, which is organized by our members. But ICA per se, we organize two major events a year. One is what we call the AMP, which is held in June. And another one is our annual Congress, which attracts delegates from around the world. And this year, the event, the Congress is supposed to be held in Kaohsiung. And obviously, we are still at the look and see situation.
Thanks. And finally, Greg.
Hi there. Yeah, great. I'm Greg Crandall. I'm the Senior Vice President of work on the Global Activation Team, which means PICO's got about 40 plus cities around the world, including China, Middle East, all of Asia, pretty much covered, US, Europe. Our business does trade shows, conferences, events, festivals, product launches, road shows, retail pop-ups, wall decorations, all the way up to the World Expo in Dubai and Olympics. So you can imagine when this comes, it clears a lot off the table. One of the components is, though, that we don't just do physical events. We do the digital solutions, the interactive technologies, the branding, PR. So we look at things in experience design. So our focus is experience design. If I say sort of what's happened over the course of the last couple months, I think number one is obviously, like everybody else, we felt the clearing of the table. So we've actually, obviously we have a digital background. So we've been respinning on that, but also getting everybody up to speed in time. So there's probably been a lot of 11, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning meetings. We pull about 70 people within our group all online. We've been going through the different types of solutions that we have, both in-house, out of house, and sort of putting the pieces together to try to help clients sort of spin and be able to solve some of the issues that they're trying to address today. But for us, I think the key point is that we're focused on experience design. We always have been, and that didn't change. So what's happened is you've unplugged our live events. So we're trying to help clients still deliver the experience design and be focused on that.
Great. So first, what I would like to start with, and actually, I'll send it over to you, Greg, first, just to give people some parallels back into history. So as we look back to the global financial crisis, do you see any similarities with what you think will happen in terms of economic impact, and certainly how events certainly came back to life after the global financial crisis, or no hope?
I think two things with that. I mean, the question really, the big question I think everybody's asking themselves is like, are we ever going to go back to live events again? And I think the obvious answer is yes. I mean, this isn't the first pandemic that ever hit. And after pandemics, whether you want to talk about conferences, events, there was always going to be concerts and shows and things like that. So we will recover. What's happened during this phase, I think you'll see that there's two schools of people, or two schools of the way experience works. Number one, there's the shock and the horror. And then the brands have either decided, we need to go to sleep, we need to go to pause, we need to cancel, we need to go hold on, the storm's here, we're going to close the doors, and we'll wait till we get to the side, the storm's out, and then we're going to come out. And then there's these other companies that sort of said, let's stay awake and let's ride it with a different way. So you'll find there are some brands that either continued on, people like Collision, people like Microsoft Build, they pivoted their business instantly, and they just, shut off the live pipe, and then they went on to the online pipeline. And so some companies will stay awake, and some companies will go to sleep. And I think that's normal from history. And the ones that stay awake will probably have a little bit easier time, and the ones that went to sleep for a little while will have a little bit of catch up to do.
I guess looking at your guys' business as an agency, how long did it take before people really started to pay for the really massive events again after global financial crisis?
It's hard to tell. In SARS, it came up really quick. And so I was here during SARS when that came up, and it bounced out pretty quick. You'll see a lot of governments throwing a lot of money and a lot of assistance to be able to help companies organize, and also with the venues. And we're seeing that even in Hong Kong. We're watching some of the venues are opening up, and there's some assistance to be able to get that back up. I think the question won't be about the assistance. The question will be, we're so used to being locked down. From lockdown, we're in Hong Kong, we're in groups of 4. So we're only allowed to socialize with groups of 4. I think maybe we'll move that to 8 people and 10 people. So I think the first part will be, how comfortable are we going to a 700 person or 1,000 person event? The psyche will be the one that needs to be repaired first. And I think that one will take a little bit for people to just go leaping back.
Absolutely. Anita, you're obviously controlled, obviously the budget allocated to the marketing team. How do you think about this, and how do you look back to, certainly history for some parallels?
Hi, sorry. So just as Greg said, we've had to hit the reset button and basically go back to, why are we doing what we need to do? What communication are we trying, message are we trying to get out there, and really think through, okay, how do we communicate those key messages? Or in our case, it's this expertise that we want to profile, or people that we want to profile out there. So I wasn't in this industry during SARS but I was during the global financial crisis. And for us, it was during the GFC, there was no travel. It was the travel that was hit hardest for us. So the people couldn't get from A to B in terms of to attend face-to-face conferences. But I think now our people are really looking at, okay, well, if this new platform works, the virtual platform does work for some instances, then why would we go back to face-to-face for some scenarios? But yeah, it's just going back to, okay, why do we need to do this event? What are we trying to achieve? And then shape the your campaign, your activation plans around that.
So really looking at the basics of marketing and trying to figure out what's necessary and what's not.
Yeah.
And have you guys scaled back the budget in that period of time, or not so much?
Yes.
It's just a matter of necessary.
So yes, but at KPMG we did a lot of our events in-house as well. Using our own premises, using our own people. It was only when we had the large-scale ones where we would engage vendors and venues for our activities. So for those, it's for those kind of layouts, we don't need to look at paying out for those anymore. So yeah, the budgets, I think the assumption is, yes, the manager will expect some savings, but I'm there also communicating to them, online does not mean free. You still need to have you still got to put it together. You still need teams of people who know what they're doing with the technology and understand how to market, roll out marketing plan using digital. It's not something that anybody can just rock up and show up and it all happens. It doesn't work like that. You might not have all the hardware required, for backdrops and stage production, but you still need a team of people, a big crew actually. And I don't know for these guys, and I mentioned before, it's like I'm working harder now than I did before, with the amount. Partly it's a learning curve, getting familiarizing ourselves with the technology, but also it's not something we can just knock up like with a face-to-face event. You still got to put people together.
Yep, the event is still an event. It requires people to come in together, whether it's online or offline. There's an interaction that people need to think about, and how is that going to be executed? Absolutely. Nora, let's shift gears a little bit. Obviously, as ICA, you oversee a lot of things that are happening in the industry, and certainly are in touch with a lot of different kinds of companies. Just from your perspective, what do you see, has really transpired over the last, couple months, and, what do you think are really some of the key points that some of the governments around the region are really taking to try to help companies in the MICE industry, and whether they be the hotels, the organizers, or even some cases, a lot of the folks that you work with on the, the actual venue side?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a very heavyweight question, Eric. Difficult one to answer, but I'll try my best. But as a narrative, ICA, we tracks all the conferences, congresses, and events organized by international associations. That's the basic foundation. And what we do at BEST is that we track all this information, because these are recurring meetings that rotates from one country to another. There are more than almost a 250,000 meetings, what we call association meetings, that's happening around the world as early as 1800s until 2020, 2035, because some of the associations, they decide their meeting far in advance. Obviously, what's happening today is unprecedented and also is extraordinary. I'm saying extraordinary because for the first time, we are all not able to fly. We are like in Malaysia, we are on lockdown, so there will be lesser cars on the road. I'm looking outside my window today, just like the past 2 weeks has been clear blue sky. So there's something positive is happening to our life. But of course, it impact the meeting industry, because face-to-face meeting is the way that we know and we should be doing our business with. We have been doing some tracking in terms of the meetings. So if I may take back quickly, in January, just before Chinese New Year, to the middle of February, when this thing's happening, we all talk about Wuhan, the epicenter of the new coronavirus. Some of the meetings in China has been postponed. Some meetings around the Asia Pacific region has also been affected. But as it grows to today, as we all know that coronavirus COVID-19 is no longer just in China, it's all over the world. So we track, there are supposed to be almost 4,500 international association meetings supposed to be organized this year. And obviously, most of them has either been deferred, postponed, canceled, and there will be a lot of challenge in terms of venues, because whatever being postponed today, if you try to slot into sometime next year, then the calendar of the venues, the hotel, the convention centers, all were pretty much booked up. So your question about the government support, we in fact has been collaborating with a university in Chengdu, try to track all the kind of support that the different government around the world are providing to their communities. That is not an easy task, because every day new policies came out, government that has thrown out a relief fund or activation fund keep on changing. The minute you throw in a few $billions of dollars to the industry, that will not be enough. You just cover a small segment of people. And I think in Asia in particular, we saw that a lot of government are pushing a lot of emphasis to help save human life. So the frontliners, the medical will get their first priority. Unfortunately, we call it the MICE industry or the meeting industry, is not in the top priority. We are possibly one of the industry which will be at the bottom of the line. So it would take a long time for all of us to recover, but I think we are having this good conversation as a community so that we can go back to our government and reach out and say that, once these things are all over, we also need the support to stay competitive.
Great. We certainly want everybody to stay competitive and moving forward to, once we get out of this, what's happening next. David, obviously your business is expos, and with that, comes obviously a lot of suppliers involved in putting these together, and certainly it's a big chain within the Philippines, as it is in most places. First question for you is what actions did you have to take in terms of making sure that your team is secure, and certainly you've re-strategized, and then a follow-up question to that is, as you think about the experience that you want your participants to have moving forward, how are you thinking about that, and what tools do you need in order to make sure that your business will be successful in the coming 6 to 8 months?
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric, for this question. So the top priority, of course, after the Philippines has announced that there will be a complete lockdown, was to secure our staff, to take care of our team. We transferred into working from home, like most of the businesses. And then to inform all our customers, basically still communicate with them, see how they're doing. Now that the month has passed, of course, we had to shift also our events. We had events planned for May and June and July that we had to move now towards the later date of the day. We're continuously in touch with the venue as well. As Noor was mentioning, there are challenges also that we foresee in terms of a lot of events that have been canceled from the first quarter and mid-quarter now, all going into the last quarter. And we're also communicating with the government and seeing like how will we be able to continue doing events, because definitely safety, security, and hygiene is a big thing to be discussed, and to see, you know, in the way of like how we know exhibitions before 10,000 people and so forth in one place will not be the case. So how we're going about it is that we're talking now with the venues and with the government on how we could secure and how we can facilitate meetings, in order also for the government to see, you know, if they will allow us for meetings to happen. The other thing is also what we have realized is that the government, at least in the Philippines, will prioritize local events versus international events due to the fact that some countries will still be on lockdown, not allow flights to happen and so forth. The way how we prepare also right now is the same way how Anita was saying, we're doing webinars. It's majority on information sharing. That's the number one. I mean, nobody's selling right now. Nobody is thinking about, to join an exhibition and so forth, but just to inform the people about what's happening, and providing as much information as possible. Good thing that I saw also in the international exhibitions market is that, for example, the London International Franchise Expo is holding a first virtual expo in June in preparation for the exhibition in September. So that's also something that we're looking at to look for new technologies in order to facilitate virtual exhibitions.
Just for everybody here, what kind of, what technologies are you looking at and evaluating to host your expos?
We don't have now a specific brand yet, but definitely we're looking at virtual exhibitions. We're looking at meeting apps that would allow messaging capabilities, video conferences, but on a larger scale. So we're talking about at least like 3,000 to 5,000 people to able to communicate in one environment, in one platform. So that's next thing. I mean, like, as you can see even here in this event, right? I mean, we're online, over 300 people are joining us right now. How much cost would that be if you would have to book a hotel and so forth? So that there will be definitely a change in terms of more people wanting to get information and wanting to get connected. I think that will still be there. The same way on how face-to-face meetings, I mean, that's our purpose, to connect people, right? So yeah, that's kind of like of the digital platforms that we're looking at that could facilitate these kinds of experiences.
So a follow-up question to that, which you mentioned, obviously you're doing these webinars, at least in at the current stage. Is this something you're considering charging for? Since obviously your business, you have to make money. How do you think about that model?
Right now, at the time of a crisis, definitely not. Right now, we're seeing ourselves as a service provider that helps our community. So we're looking at as promoting, not promoting, but informing as much as our community. In the future, it might look a little bit different. Once it's, once business has come back and then recovered a little bit, we would see, we would have to discuss it also with our brands and our clients, how they look at it, because at the end it's the value, right? There's still a value into it. There's still a cost involved into it. Anita was also saying there's people that are needed in order to execute these kind of events. So as we would go into specializations of whatever industry that we're servicing, obviously there is value exchange. And then there is, of course, the possibility also of charging, and we would have to think about that. But in terms of like the business models, that's something that still needs to be developed and to be discussed with the industry stakeholders, because definitely that's a different change now.
For sure. Anita, over to you. Obviously, you know, KPMG's events, 600 a year, China and Hong Kong. That's a massive amount. Obviously, you guys, you know, are obviously doing thought leadership programs, but you're hoping to obviously have a result at some point and build relationships, you know, across the various regions. How do you think about the value of webinars compared to the offline experience, and how are you trying to augment that for the partners at KPMG?
Good question. We're on this learning curve now. So at the moment, like David was saying, we're not obviously charging. Well, we don't typically charge for our events anyway. But I guess how we're doing it now is really, again, we're just sharing the information. We're helping businesses to get through this crisis. That's our priority at the moment, just helping our clients and the businesses here in Hong Kong to recover and find ways to survive and thrive through this crisis. But you know, in the future, I mean, I'm already starting to look at, you know, how do we monetize what we're doing? Well, how we will monetize what we're doing through these webinars in the future. And we haven't, I'll be honest, we haven't figured it out yet. And you know, me talking to my counterparts in KPMG, other member firms, it's the same thing. You know, we're all at that stage where, how do we do this? You know, I mentioned earlier to you guys that we do a lot of events, collaborate with a lot of chambers and professional associations, and you know, nobody's allowed to share data, right? So we don't know who attends these. So how do we connect with them? So for our own events, it's easier to do. We can do the follow-ups. But my challenge now is trying to figure out how we follow up on new opportunities with new and build, you know, new database or new contacts and potential clients. That is a bit of a void for me. So if you guys got any suggestions.
Actually, some questions that I think we have a couple of people who want to ask you. In terms of, obviously, you've been evaluating, you know, webinar tools and online conferencing platforms. You know, what's important to KPMG as you're evaluating these, and obviously that experience that you want your attendees to have, and at the same time making sure that, you know, what that is falls in line with the KPMG brand?
It's all around security, the cybersecurity. We've had quite a vigorous sort of review with all the different platforms, and bear in mind that we are China-based, so we do have strict sort of China state security laws that we need to comply with. So we have to use platforms that are, you know, that basically that are approved, KPMG approved. So in fact, Zoom isn't one of them. We can speak, we can be invited and speak at a Zoom webinar, but we don't currently use that platform. But you know, we've also explored Microsoft Teams. What are the other ones? There's a lot of the China-based ones also we've been exploring. But these are just webinars up to, say, 1,000 people, right? We have a challenge. We've got a couple of conferences that are coming up that we need to secure a platform for, which will provide an online exhibition type experience. So we're actually exploring a couple of platforms now. But we haven't yet decided which ones we're going to use, because again, it's a lot of these organizations are startups as well. So we're very conservative. I mean, KPMG is typically a conservative brand, so we're unsure about how we use these some of these startup companies at this stage, because security is such a big component for us, issue for us.
Absolutely. Professionals in that event experience, how do you look at really what kind of experience you think people should have in an online environment, and how are you thinking about that for your customers?
Good question, because I mean, I think to go back to what Anita had said. There's a lot of these platforms, and as she said, you have to look back and say, what am I trying to accomplish? And I thought what she said was really important. What am I trying to accomplish? And we sort of sit down with clients and we have that discussion. Because all these platforms out there, and I'm noticing a couple, like, which platform are you using? Which platform are you using? And like I said, we did an evaluation. I must be 30 different applications, right? Different platforms, along with our ability to be able to create our own, which we do as well, because we've got our own technology group. And we found that everyone has an advantage and a disadvantage. And so really you have to be agnostic in this and say, what are you trying to do? And once you figure out what you're trying to do, you can start to create the solution for it, okay? So as an example, we just finished doing Huawei Developers Conference. It was supposed to be a live event for us, and then it suddenly stopped. And so we had to pivot and put this thing into a digital space for Huawei. And you realize that this is not a like-for-like type swap. You're not trying to create a live experience online, In a live experience, you can do a session at a conference for 60 to 90 minutes. You would never get away with it online. People will unplug, right? So you really need to be 20, 40%, 40 minutes in general, right? You lose a lot of that interaction piece. So, but you can try to facilitate it when you're doing it. So you can't just transfer things over. You have to try to figure out what the online experience is going to be. In some cases, though, it does give you advantage, right? So when I'm doing a speaking and you're standing up on the stage and I'm trying to do visual expressions of stuff, you're watching at quite a long distance, right? But if I am using augmented and starting to use that digital technology, I can possibly communicate a little bit better. If I take a demo and put it into a 360 space, or if I gamify, or if there's other things I can do, and what happens is it turns into more of a broadcast than it does necessarily being into a live event. So you have to put your head into that broadcast of content expression as opposed to the event. And the last thing I guess I would add into that is like I said, on the online space, sometimes we forget with an experience. With events, we would come up and we would do an event and there would be a peak, and then of course there would be a valley, right? And a peak and a valley for an event. Really, what we're in the business of doing is audience creation and audience capture and audience stickiness. And what can I do with that audience once I have them? And then what do I do with them next? So that when there's a peak in an experience, in an event world, a lot of times I would lose those people and I would have to go remarket to them to get them back to the next one. In a digital space, I want to peak it up there in some sort of an experience, but then I want to keep them. And in a digital space, I can keep doing that. So when it's time to plug the audience back into a live event, I will have an audience. So you must think about the pre-event, the experience that you're trying to create online, or however you're creating it online, offline, and then the post to be able to capture and keep so that I can go back to bring them back up again. And so I think if we go back into audience creation, stickiness, data analytics, and what am I doing with them? It's not just a platform to call up company X and say, hi, would you do that?
Greg, we have on this call, we have quite a few associations and chambers of commerce, and who are generally regularly running the smaller events, 50 to 100 people, but they're happening more frequently. How would you recommend those folks to think about these events and that business model that is associated with that, which might in the past make up 30-40% of their revenue just for the ticket sales to a 3-hour event, 2-hour event, and really trying to think about that in the virtual world and still making sure that they can generate revenue from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for those smaller groups, again, I think if they think of presenting their content differently and thinking of presenting their content and building their relationship. And maybe what the business model is done is it's structured about when I go onto this space, who am I going to meet? who am I going to meet? What connection can you give me? What can I do with those business relationships? So the value for me to pay for that will be to what's the audience I'm going to reach? What business can I create? What kind of software can I use for transaction? And then what's the follow-on piece to it?
Nor, you've looked, obviously you have a lot of members in different parts of the industry. What are some of the, best practices that you've seen, coming out of the conversations that you've had across the industry in terms of revenue generation in a virtual world?
Yeah, I think from the association perspective, of course, this is a very, very harsh wake-up call for all of us, because we are used to one business model. That is the membership dues, which is taking up almost 70 to 80% of the income for the association, and the remaining are from the live events. So obviously, not having the live event will hurt us. And now that we can't travel and businesses are affected from this pandemic, of course, we will definitely lose members. After our fiscal year, which is by 2021, we will see the real number of companies who are still members. What's happening now, I think, is that people are trying to make sense with what's really going on. Associations are basically people who come together as a community. And then we use all these platforms, like just before we have the social media, now then we have the instant messaging. Now we have the upgraded version of the instant messaging. Instead of WhatsApp or WeChat, now we are using Zoom. In China, they're using Biz Conference Video, Tencent. All this platform that came about is actually for the members to continue to have the conversation and to engage with each other. But we have to remember that actually by having this conversation and engagement, we are trying to keep the community together. We are not able to actually to build the market like before. When we had the face-to-face meeting, you were able to meet more people at trade shows, at exhibitions, at conferences, and build that interpersonal relationship to bring in new clients, new members to your association. And that is where you are growing that particular market. I think the webinars industry that we are going through today is an immediate remedy to the challenges that we are having. Because I can't travel, so we're now having this webinar. As we can see in the group, we have about 300 over people. And there's so many webinars going on these days. And I think that's also another important question is people asking, is this session recorded? But then do you really have the time to go and watch back all the recorded session? I don't think so, because everybody is now already complaining that, I have so many Zoom meetings, Zoom left, Zoom right, Zoom up, and Zoom down, So in a way, we are saying, or we are glorifying that we are busy because we are connected digitally. But that is all not actually creating any markets. We are just keeping our community to be engaged, trying to make sense of all this happening. I'd like to just touch on what Gregory has mentioned just now. Those people who are able to strive through this world biggest test, those companies, those associations, those organizations will survive. But we must remember there will be a lot of companies out there, individuals, organizations, associations that will collapse. So, we wouldn't know all this yet, because we don't know how long more we're going to go through this pandemic. There's already a lot of conversation out there talking about the three different theories. Are we on the V curve? That means, are we dropping down and coming back up straight? That means after this all over, we're going to be going back to our normal life. Or are we going on a U shape? That means it's a long way down and then we're going to come back up. Or the scariest one is, are we going on an L shape? So imagine if you're going on an L shape, the curve will be there for a long time. And that's something that none of us have the answer. But I think in all respect to your question, Eric, just like the face-to-face meeting that we have been doing before January, It's all depending on our budget. If the budget is big, we get a 5-star hotel, we got a 5-star convention venues or exhibition hall to run our events. That's what's happening today. If we have that budget, you can put in a very high pre-production for our webinars using a broadcast technology, because some association and organization out there have been doing this live event very well through webinars. They're using dedicated satellite servers. They can televise live surgery from different parts of the world. But for us, for those, I wouldn't say for us, for those that never tried online events, then we are trying to make sense of all of this. I have a feeling that if we are trying to monetize from the webinars, for those that have never done that before, I think it's a bit too late. But for those that have been doing this before, because you've been selling pay-per-view, recorded sessions, especially medical conferences who are very high-end, I think they've been doing this and they know that is their part of their game. I think the biggest challenge is for all of us, because we're trying to become a broadcaster, but we are not. So by having a couple of speakers on the screen and a 300 over participants, we said we had a very successful webinar. But again, successful depending on both sides, because as we can speak well here, it's also depending on the receiver end, whether they are at home and having a good internet connection as well. Otherwise, they will not be hearing me well, and then it's not a successful event. In the real event, you have a microphone, somebody speaks, you can hear, and if it doesn't hear, you can tweak the microphone right away. But online, you have audience all around the world. I have logged into some webinars that I cannot go through because of the relay and the slow internet connectivity, that I eventually give up. So, so this is happening in our life at the moment, and I think we have to make a real sense of how to deal with this.
That's absolutely true. The Microsoft and AWS servers right now are at full max in terms of the number of people that are using these platforms these days, and definitely internet is the critical aspect to anybody being able to communicate, which makes it very different from some of the past historical downturns with events that we've seen. Just as a note, because somebody else had this question, there was actually a couple of our Chamber of Commerce clients around the region have actually moved to being able to provide basically a webinar card on top of their general membership, where essentially, they're not charging too much, but hey, you buy the webinar card, you get access to all the webinars that are being hosted, and it's basically a top up. So, it gives access, it gives a way to bring revenue back in, and certainly there is some element of revenue happening as opposed to being zero. But the key, and I think this is certainly came out of the discussion here, at the core of everything about that experience, but an online webinar is really about content. If the content is useful, the content, is actually going to give people valuable information, people are then going to come back and have something that obviously are going to be useful for people in the future. So I do want, there's another question which I want to wrap up. I know we're coming to the end of at least the time that we promised folks. And Anita just sent me an email. She lost power while we're talking about internet. Anita lost power in Hong Kong. So this is exactly what can happen, and certainly the challenge that exists. Event webinar fatigue. How do you overcome that, and how do you differentiate yourselves with that experience and make sure that people are going to come to your webinar as opposed to, joining somebody else's, or just get annoyed altogether in the end? David, let's start with you on that, and we'll ask a couple of folks.
Yeah, sure. After listening to the different statements of the panelists, I would say every brand has to think, let's just say as a brand or as an event organizer, I guess everybody has to look at what their purpose is. And, I guess it comes down again to the quality of the content. If you run a conference, for example, who are the speakers, what are the topics that will be discussed, and to make clear to the audience also what they will get out of it, what is in it for them. I think if that is strong enough, then people would be willing also to make payments, to pay for the value for it. I think the same thing for the exhibitions. As long as it's very clear, what will people get out of it? I think there's also a way to generate revenues from that. In terms of the business models that we know from the old way of exhibitions, we would have to evaluate that depending on, how the new normal will be defined. And that will be defined not just by us as the organizers, but, that is discussion with the government, with the suppliers, with the venues, and so forth, in order to come up with a win-win situation in terms of business modeling.
Great. Greg, how do we turn a 2-day conference into a digital product? We can't expect delegates to sit in front of a screen for 2 days.
Yeah.
This is a question from the audience.
This is what I was saying before. I think, and going back to how David was answering that question, and I saw it also come up, how do I make money out of this? What would I pay for this? This is the same as a live experience. Why would I go to this conference? Why would I go to this event? Is about the connections of the people who I will meet, right? It's about the content that I'm going to receive. That is the same in a live experience that it is in the digital experience. So it is important when building the platforms, depending on which ones we're connecting to and which solutions off the shelf are created, how do we make sure that the interaction between, taking an audience and putting them into a work group, where they can work together closely. You can't, it's hard to do that online. When you're sitting in a room of 300 people and you go to the reception, how do I find the 4 people that are going to turn around and move my business forward, right? How do I find them, right? In the live experience, I have to sort of go bump and bump and bump and drink and hi, how are you? But I think there's some digital advantages there when you've got data, knowing who they are, knowing what their objectives are. So when they come into a room or they come into a place or space, we can do a little faster connection of who those people are. And we can maybe, as hosts, put those people together so that they can get the value. So then when you ask me, what can I charge a ticket price for it? Yeah, because people will walk out of there saying, oh my gosh, that really helped me. So again, I go back to the basics. What do we do in a live experience? What are we trying to do, and can we do it better in a digital experience? And when we put the two of them back, when all this is over, I still think we're going to have both going together. I don't think we'll be just doing live event with no online. I think we're going to do a hybrid of that.
Nor, over to you. In terms of timeline, obviously every country is going to be a little bit different. When do you think organizations can start organizing live events again? What's your crystal ball say?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I just have a candle in my house, and the candle all at the moment without any fire. So I don't think that we're going to have any live event at the moment, even though as we all know, or maybe you have read, in China, there's a lot of cities that's opening up. Some cities already start having their own conferences. They're trying to run their own exhibition as well in China at the moment. But again, there's also a lot of news report about the return travelers from overseas bringing back the wave of the pandemic, which is a concern of the Chinese government. But anyway, I think the answer to that question is definitely we're not going to see any live event for a long time until we got all this settled down. While we are in this situation, I think we as an association, and I think all the people in the business has to remember that this is a challenge, but at the same time, it's also an opportunity. But we have to really distinguish between and separate what is a signal, what is a noise, because the real signal that we are getting is going to be the opportunity for us to get the engagement and the possible new model of business for our organization. I think we need to be very careful with that. And then we need to be very proactive. We need to reset, rethink, and re-strategize in whatever we do so that we keep ourselves relevant. And I'm sure that I'm very positive that all of this will be over. It's just a matter of time because there are at least 80 or 100 testing happening around the world. I'm sure that somebody will find that vaccine very soon.
David, when do you think we'll see live events again?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So for us, in the coordination with the venues and the government, a lot of our events would start back in August. At least that's what is being packed right now. The discussion only right now is still in terms of like, you know, what kind of events will be allowed. That comes from exhibition and conferences. Because the most important factor that we have to work on is right now safety, security, and hygiene. So discussions were faced at, you know, for example, roundtables that could accommodate usually before 10 people. Now it's only 5 people. In exhibitions, for example, that there will still be like a certain kind of zoning, and you know, only a certain amount of numbers of people will be allowed into it, into the exhibition halls. So that's what they're looking at right now. So it's a mixture right now. We're looking at August moving forward, but it will still depend on what kind of solutions the industry can come up with in order to create secured events. And then, of course, the next step is in terms of government, whether the government will allow us to hold events. So that's how it looks right now here in the Philippines, at least. And yeah. It's still a wait and see as of today, because I mean we're still in a total lockdown right now until end of April. You know, I mean that's the reality of where it is right now, right? How it will look now in 3 months from now, it's still, you know, to be wait and see.
Absolutely. Anita, thanks for joining back. Glad you got your power back. It happens. We were just talking about the internet and the risk of internet, and not internet, but power, the other problem. What is your prediction? When are we going to start seeing KPMG live events again?
We're hoping for, well, I'm hopeful for around September. But yeah, it's just really hard to predict. But I think what we will probably do is look at a hybrid model. So where some activities will be face to face because it's important to do that, and then others will be we'll use the virtual platforms. But yeah, I still have in my mind, a mindset is how we engage people through a virtual platform. I think that's key for us. So, but hopefully September. I actually saw a first promotion for a concert next March in Hong Kong. So that's the first first sort of concert sort of promotion we've seen here.
We're all certainly hopeful.
Yeah, but I'm not sure about the convention centers when they're starting up again. But let's hope we can bring events back to Hong Kong sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And Greg, final question for you. You know, spending the last couple of years working on 2 of the biggest events in the world, the Japan Olympics, as well as the Dubai World Expo. What do you think we're going to see those events that have been postponed? What's your prediction on the experience people will get, and how do you think people will react to such a massive event coming up?
I mean, you know, I think the only person I trust right now is Bill Gates on predictions, you know. But, you know, if we get to this point, you know, where we start to socialize again, and I agree with Anita, we see stuff, because, I mean, I see stuff all across the city. I see trade shows. I see trade shows still scheduled for September, October, and things like that. And I think they'll be sort of dialed down and sensitive stuff. But I think we'll have cleared out, hopefully, our cases and have a strict border control. But I don't see everybody flying in here going to these things. I think that's going to be still an issue. But if we get to the Olympics next year, it might be just the healing that we need. If you think about the Olympics in 1945 was World War II. And 1948 was the first Olympics after World War II. It will probably be the most emotionally packed Olympics we can imagine, right? Because the world was dysfunctional. I'm sorry, we've handled this pandemic in a disaster zone, right? This is a real mess up. But I think the Olympics and the symbolism of what it is the world coming together under health, under unity, under sports, right? So will it be the volume of people that I think would be traveling? I don't know whether to have the volume of people. But it also was to be, if you remember, the launch of 5G. And it was Japan's real launch into 5G and the robots and the pieces that they had. And that was already scheduled for this year, right? So July, we were ready to go with that. I think this will allow us to push that 5G even harder. And I think the virtual presence and the activations of technology in the Japan Olympics will be there. But I think it will be all the global eyes will be on there. And I think brands across the world will want to be participating in that. And I also think the same thing goes on for World Expo. Both of those are showcasing of world experiences where the world sort of comes together. And so I'm going to try to pretend that that would be our coming out party for the world, that it's okay. So I think if we get our act together before then, the Olympics and the World Expos can be two of the coming outs of saying, okay, we've got a new way. With whatever health restrictions allow, whether it be, testing before you get on a plane, testing when you land on a plane, I think we'll sort those out by then.
I'd like to just jump in here. Sorry,
absolutely.
I'd be interested. I'd be interested to see the sporting, sort of that side of it, because I know, like with the football leagues or soccer in some places, they're itching to. I think the sporting industry has been heavily hit as well. So I think they may be one of the first to start going out there and get the confidence of our people, of people to go out.
Agree.
Yep. They're trying to find ways to get back into it and start getting heavily on advertising revenue and the TV contracts, which makes massive amounts of money. So
and at some point they were already producing games and competitions with no audiences. So they were doing that already. They were just starting to do that already. But as long as you can get the athletes together to compete and you would do that section, that's one way to start.
Yep. Instead of watching athletes play video games, which is what the NBA has been doing, and it's been quite interesting. But definitely, it's not basketball. Well, good. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing also, what I have observed here is what the government was saying. I don't know how it would be in other countries, but they're looking definitely to start also into different phases when it comes towards events. And they're looking first to allow like localized events, meaning, for the local community, and then only in step 2 to allow like international events that would, bring an influx of international travelers back to the country. I mean, just also something to observe in terms of trends for events, that also probably to look at more community events and localized events. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've gone a little bit over our time, but I want to thank all of our panelists for participating. It's been great having everybody on here. And certainly, we definitely appreciate the questions that everybody provided through the Q&A session. And certainly, we are, again, this is one of a series of events that EventBank is running, as it relates to, EventBank in general. Please look out for May 7th. Our EventBank team has been working hard on new technologies and new features that we are going to help support the event industry, as well as the associations and chambers of commerce around Asia Pacific. So look for some great news coming up on May 7th, and also the upcoming webinars that we will also be hosting again shortly. Again, thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for participating. The massive turnout today, over 330 people on our webinar today. So let's all hope we turn things around, and we can all hopefully meet in person very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.